Hello friends, Mystery here. It's time to respond to my #1 biggest op out there, Reginald. He put a video out a day or two ago, who has the best build? And this build goes over his, quote, best build versus my, quote, best build. And since then, it has become a little bit obsoleted, through no fault of either of ours, because I have since updated my opinions on what the best build, and looking back now, it very clearly isn't this, or really even anything close to this, because of course, it's arc rifle spam. It's just arc rifle spam. If you wanted to do like a runner-up build, in terms of if you wanted to stick to a more melee focus and not just become a arc rifle degenerate, then you could do something like this build here, Shock Trooper, which is just Arc Maul plus Flensing, and Arc Maul is the other runner-up weapon, where I would say that Arc Maul or Arc Rifle have to be in whatever we're considering the, quote, strongest build, right? So if you're not using those, I don't think you're actually in the running, because those weapons are just so strong and arc scaling is so strong, etc. However, today, what I want to do is talk a little bit about my build, and then we're going to spend most of the time to focus on Reginald's build, because something he does at the end of his video is he prescribes and changes to make my build more efficient as per his testing, etc. And I've done the same. I spent a good amount of time looking at this, and I wanted to, as I tried to kind of do with this build, and I think that was probably why the build ended up not being as strong as I would have liked, is even though this build is strong, it's a much more hybridized version of his, where his build is this is like a solo player build, where you can be self-sufficient. You're doing a lot of damage by yourself. We can do a lot of damage by ourselves here too. However, we do the best when we are augmented by our team. If we have team support around us, we can really amp damage up, because it can provide a lot of space, it can provide a lot of stagger for Shock Maul, you know, just giving us the room to breathe, where Transonic blades can like kind of hold their own a little bit better compared to Shock Maul, which is more of a sporting weapon. But that being said, what I'll say about this build is this, that I think what I did is I tried to copy, you know, having the same keystone, blitz, and ability, and then make iterations on that. But today I'm going to do a better, more faithful job of that. We are going to be modifying his build, but we're going to be keeping so much closer to the spirit of the build. I would say that 95% of the spirit of the build and the concept behind it will be staying the same. However, it's going to jump in the power level by, I'd say, probably at least 50%, or maybe like 33, depending on how you do that math, right? But we're going to make this a lot better, and I'll be breaking down exactly why, and hopefully Reginald finally can see the light. But with that being said, let's go ahead and begin. So here we have Reginald's build in game, and we will talk about that in a second. Let's first start with the weapons, where I have made a very select few changes. We first have our paired Transonic blades. I do have a little bit of an error on here. I put crit chance. I don't think that crit chance is necessary. I think you should probably have unyielding on there, as Reginald does in his build here. So go ahead and copy exactly what his Transonic blades are. I think these are fine, and this is very much integral to the spirit of the build. The goal here is we want to hit as high a crit chance as possible with Riposte and Shred. This combined with the critical bonus on the weapon, which is about 6.4%. It's exactly 6.4%. I don't know why I said about, but we'll add that to the base on the class, which is 7.5, and then we'll add another 6% from this talent right here, and that'll bring us to a pretty reasonable number, all this considered, between 50 and 60% crit, which is very good, especially for what we're going to be trying to get into with this thing. So yeah, carapace unyielding, we don't need that extra 5% there. That's not much of a real boost. So we'll leave that as exactly as it is. Let's go over to the Phosphor Blast Pistol, and I'll start to explain why I'm making the change I'm making here. He includes a couple of things here: flak armor unyielding on the shots, and then man stopper and surgical as his blessing here. And so this is where we're going to start to have our first actual modifications. Let me show you this. So I am going to be using range critical strike unyielding in furnace surgical instead. And my thought process here, and first of all, I need to load into a Havoc 40 Psychanium. Boom, boom. So my thought process here is that this weapon, I am not using it like this, where I'm repeatedly shooting on the same target generally. And even if I am, I'm not keeping the weapon out. If you're unaware, these perks and stuff only apply to when the weapon is equipped in your hand. So the direct damage is really only affected it's only the direct damage that's affected by this. But for me, Infernus is going to provide a lot of value here. And I want to explain why I do Infernus instead of Manstopper. First of all, Manstopper can be pretty cool. However, I think it like really, really doesn't get a lot of the value that you can get out of Infernus. And Manstopper isn't all that necessary unless there's an absolutely crazy dense horde that you can get this magical lineup, because already we get penetration on this shot even without critical, even without Manstopper, right? The penetration is actually very good on this weapon. So we can actually, I believe we can actually even shoot through a boss. Hold on. Can I pull up like a playground? Yeah. Can I shoot through a boss into this guy? Not quite. So Manstopper could do that. You could shoot through a boss and hit the guy behind him. But yeah, the extra value that I think we can add by putting Infernus in here will outweigh Manstopper, and that is for the simple reason that this really simplifies what we have to do with our brain, right? Adding in damage over time effects and passive damage, because this class can do a lot of it, especially with our new spheric buddy up there, is very, very useful. So yes, you can, if you're using this weapon normally with Manstopper, you can one-shot, headshot bombers like that and get rid of them. Actually, maybe, can you not do this guy? Does he not? Why did he take so little damage from that? Does he get like an armored head or something? Oh, I guess he does survive a headshot. So just the regular bomber, right? But with Infernus, we can be the laziest boy possible, which in general is a better way to play it, I believe, and just get a single crit, if I had actually hit the crit. But if we get a single crit on chest level, they are guaranteed to die on Havoc 40. So bombers, chest shot, gas bombers, chest shot, trappers, chest shot, all those guys die, and they would also die to a punch through attack. So like small shotgunners, the dreg shotgunners, not dregs, those are scabs, right? Those are dregs. Yeah, they die guaranteed to one critical shot, chest level with this pistol. I think that having that utility, the guaranteed assertion that, okay, this is how I use the pistol, by the way. I'm fighting over here. This is really realistic fighting. I hear a gas bomber, I find him, boom. Okay, I have an assurance that he's dead, right? Yeah, there it is. There it is. I have an assurance. I didn't know if I crit or not, but I have an assurance that he's dead because I know that if I hold this aim down the sight, like for this long, right there, at 2 seconds, it's a guaranteed crit, right? So then he is guaranteed to get those fire stacks and guaranteed to therefore die. So I can just fire that off and then go about my day and be over here while I'm waiting for him to die in the background. So the other thing that the reason I put 5% crit on there is it just improves your chances of getting that roll and getting that crit that little bit more. I know it doesn't add up to a whole lot, but the way I see it is that 5% plus the 3% or the 6% that's right here on the tree, that combined kind of cuts like about 1/3 of a second. I have to wait for one less stack of surgical in order to get that little bit better chance of popping the crit. And I like to roll them bones a little early. I don't want to wait the full 2 seconds to get a guaranteed shot. I'm going to roll them bones after 1 second and have a pretty dang good shot at having it happen. You know, a 70-75% chance. So that's going to boost our odds just that little bit. And plus, I'm not keeping this weapon out anyway. So yeah, why not? Crits are so important here. So yeah, the other thing that this obviously adds that I've talked about a lot is boss damage. You know, Reginald poo-poos this in his video that like, oh yeah, it's only 1,000 DPS, but hey man, 1,000 DPS is 1,000 DPS, and this is passively occurring while you're doing everything else over here, and it can scale if we could have some sort of magical way of increasing the damage taken by this character here. That can scale, right? That can scale up. So yeah, we can do 1,000 DPS for basically free on bosses, and then we can just do anything else at the same time. We could be applying burns to tons of other enemies like this. We could be taking out those Reapers and still keep the burn up over here. To me, I think it's so good to be able to do this and have the assurance that that Reaper is going to die because 14 fire stacks, no one is living, right? We can just use that even on Havoc 40, a single new spheric and a single shot from our Phosphor where the crit is a guaranteed kill because of those fire stacks. So that to me is a very, very good value for this weapon, and I could not play it without the Infernus there. So now let's look at the Curios. Now I didn't go and look at Reginald's build to see what Curios he was running before. He said he was still thinking and working on that. So I went ahead and made some recommendations here. We are going to be using a little bit of different setup with Curios, although I'm keeping at least one element of the Spirit alive, which is he said he likes Gunner damage resist, which I can agree with. Gunners are one of the more deadly enemies to Skitarii because he's not that fast, so Gunners can get a beat on you, and consistent damage from them can outcompete the amount of regeneration that Skitarii has, which is generally one of his strengths. We don't really have too much on this class to prevent getting immediately blown up, but that consistent damage when gunners are shooting you is very, very annoying. So we can counter that by having damage resistance versus gunners in here. But we're going to swap a couple other things and get a lot of power here. So first of all, triple toughness across the board. I think it's just the best way to run. Reginald says he likes to block a lot. I don't necessarily know if we need to be doing a whole lot of blocking with this build, especially with our shocking, especially with our Nospheric. You might block one time, but then you can go back on the aggressive, counter claw, counter shock, Nospheric command, shoot a pistol, a lot of things that can stagger and get these enemies out of our face. We don't need to be blocking, I think, generally. But the number one thing that needs to be changed here is combat ability regeneration being the perks here. This is the number one most valuable thing that every Skitarii should have on their build, no matter what, hands down, GG, no questions. What this does is it multiplies all capacitance generation by 1.12%. You get 12% extra generation for taking 3 of these. And it doesn't technically do that, right? But what it does is it lowers the cap required to get a charge from 100% by 12% to 88%. So instead of the normal game where I have to kill every enemy, by the way, is worth 2% capacitance, I would have to kill 50 enemies. Now I have to kill 44. Or if you envision it another way, you get 2% of your capacitance per second. This means that I'm waiting 44 seconds instead of 50 seconds to get it when I'm just standing around. And that applies to all other sources of regeneration as well. So if I have something like, which I don't yet in the build, but if I have Satiated Steel here and it's replenishing 25%, that 25, when taken as a percentage of 88, is actually closer to 30 than it is to 25. So we end up getting a lot more value out of every single node here. They're all technically getting 12% more value, which means 12% more ultimate charges. And being high on charges is really, really, really good for this build. So that is a 1,000,000%, 12% ultimate charge upgrade, GG. That's amazing. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm changing his gunner resist. He had 3 gunner resist. I'm changing it to 2 gunner resist and 1 bomber resist. Why did I do this? Well, this is a multiplicative damage reduction. How that works is, for just like most reductions in the game, it's not an additive thing because you could hit 100%, right? So what you're getting is, on the first time you allocate this, you'll get 20% because it's the whatever damage you take times 0.8, but then you take that remainder and multiply that by 0.8. So you'd end up at getting 36% out of the second one because you'd be at 0.64 of the total damage. You get 36%. But then if you multiply that 0.64 by 0.8, you end up at like 49%. You're not even getting to 50%, I believe, total reduction to the damage. So your last Curio, as compared to what it reads on the tin, instead of giving 20% damage resistance versus gunners, it's only giving like 13. So you go from 20 to 16 to 13. We're not getting almost any value out of this thing. Well, not almost any value, but it's way less value than it's advertised. And I think that's bad. I would rather have 1 versus bombers, because bombers are another type of damage, kind of like gunners, where it's ambient damage and oftentimes it's unavoidable. You will take ticks of bomber gas damage without even realizing that you were in the way of the cloud. It'll start ticking on you. A firebomb will go off and you'll take 1 or 2 ticks before you can escape its radius. This will reduce that by a flat 20% on top of other damage reductions you have in the class. It actually adds up a lot. If I had more space for it, and I'll give it a prescription to that, but if I had more space for that, I would run 2 of these as well, because it will make you incredibly tanky versus bombs. And bombs, as I said, are stupid, unavoidable damage that can and will affect you directly, as compared to gunners, which you can dodge a lot of times if you can see them coming. So there's some changes there. And then the last thing we're doing is we're putting toughness regeneration speed on all these, because obviously we're going to be swapping our aura in the build to get that better aura. Okay, let's go over to his talent tree. So here is his talent tree as it stands, and we are going to change 5 nodes here, and it is going to make a tremendous improvement in the value to not only us and the quality and ease of play for us, but also a value to the entire team, because we are going to be having so many more ultimates, so much more team-wide value as far as regeneration and damage augmentation that we can provide as a Skitarii, some unique stuff that really only the Skitarii can provide, and we're going to be playing less selfishly and be more powerful ourselves. charges. So we have to remove 5 nodes here. Let's go through what these 5 nodes are and why I'm cutting them out. They're the weakest 5 nodes that we have. So Purgative Service Skull is gotta go. I'm sorry. The fact that it cuts into Medicae Service Skull uses is pretty bad. It's kind of always worth just assuming really bad things are going to happen and you might need Medicae Service Skulls. And since you never know when you'll get another grenade recharge, yes, you might have a bunch of extra ones, but the value generated by this is seldom worth it. And it's definitely not worth a talent point in the best build on the class, right? The best build in the class is going to be very, very tight in terms of talent points. Then we're going to remove Capacitor Limit Override. Reginald said he wanted this node here because it provides 20% extra rending, or 20% extra damage, technically. I would do the math here. It's 20% extra damage on the Transonic blades versus Crushers, and it's pretty similar to that versus the Unyielding and bosses. But 15% rending is okay, but it doesn't do anything for our Cord Claw, right? Because it already has 50% innate rending. So it's adding almost no damage for Cord Claw, and the Revolver doesn't really care that much either. This is good for Transonics, but it's just not a very strong node in general. We're going to pop that bad boy out. We're also going to take out Slice and Dice. This is a node that doesn't get any value really until you've used your ultimate 3 times back to back, because on your first strike, you don't get any bonus damage. The second strike, you'll get 20% bonus damage, the third 40, and the fourth is where you'll get that 60% bonus damage. Draining 4 charges on this class is a very bad idea though with this build, because every time you drain a charge, you're losing value on several different nodes here. You're losing value on Residual Current Buffer. If you have 5 charges, you have 22.5 toughness damage reduction. Insane. If you have 1 charge after using this to melt a boss, you have it's 12.5%, right? You've lost 10%. And then the same thing applies up here. By using 4 charges, you've lost 2% toughness regeneration per second. You've gone down from 5.5 to 3.5. That's not good. And the other thing this does is if we deplete our charges all at once and dump ourselves down to low charges, then the next time we do use a charge to use a Cord Claw, we will end up getting way less value out of Advanced Power Management, which is super fucking strong, but it's strong when you use it at 5 charges or at 4 charges, because it gives you 10% or 10 seconds of your strength, or 5% strength times the number of charges you had when you used it. So 5 charges is 25% strength for 10 seconds, which is massive. So we want to hang out at high charges to get tons of extra defense and have a really big value out of Advanced Power Management here. So we're going to take this out because we are no longer going to be spamming Cord Claw back to back to back to kill bosses. We got another way of augmenting our damage to kill bosses that's going to be way more effective, and it's going to do crazy stuff. The other 2 nodes we're cutting out is we're cutting out Faux Render Creed, as you might have imagined, because you saw the Curios. We're going to be going up here for Resurgence, because Resurgence is a really, really good Aura. And then we'll take out Servo Core Recharge Engine. This is something that I played a game with this build, and I found this generating very little value. I always suspected it generated pretty little value, but looking back at the game tape for about 5 minutes, there was very, very few times where I felt that I was taking damage that I then replenished with a headshot, or that it really offset it, because a lot of the damage that you take as Skitarii is not to direct getting hit in melee, and if you do, you can recover that by critting with this node here. You can recover that passively with auto repair doctrines, and already killing enemies is 5% 5% toughness back in melee kills. This is going to give us extra generation on headshot kills. However, it's instant, and a lot of times this is just doing nothing for you, especially if, as Reginald said, he doesn't have a whole lot of toughness regen in this build. He didn't take Surge Extension for the simple fact that he is a Havoc 40 player, and he doesn't intend on taking these big shots of damage where he needs to sweat this damage off. He needs the minimal amount of regeneration to recover for gunners, and that's it, right? That's the skirt of regeneration we're talking. So we're taking this node out because it's just unnecessary. Okay, so now we have 5 juicy points to spend, and these are going to be very well spent. They are going to massively increase the build power. So the first thing we're doing is we are allocating Adaptive Combat Calibration. This is needed, first of all, to make the bridge, but this is a very, very powerful node. It adds 30% melee cleave, right? And let me show you something here. So if we have this and we had our original Faux Render Creed here, and we were attacking, say, for instance, hypothetically, some Ragers. Let me get some Ragers here. Berserker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's hit these guys. Let's go. Boom. Okay, so that hits 3 of them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just to test and prove the case. Hits 3. However, if we remove this node even if we lose the 15% cleave there and we add in the adaptive combat calibration here, and we can remove this, so now we have gained 15% cleave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We hit 4 of these guys. So we have gained 15% cleave overall, which is very impactful for our claw. And the rending here, the 7.5% rending, we will not miss this. This would really only matter a tiny bit, like a little sub 10% to our Transonic blades, but nothing else really cares about that damage. And the cleave is very nice, but we picked it up right here with adaptive combat calibration. This is a really, really good node, and it removes a weak node to get a bunch of extra strength. So we take that node. Okay, that's our first change. Now we have, I've accidentally allocated another point because I'm down points somehow. Hold on. Where did I put that other point? I should have more. Where is it? Scanning. Scanning. Didn't I have 5 points to spend? Mr. E, where is it? Guys, type it in the comments. Shout out. Oh, there it is. What the fuck? How did I get up there? Okay, anyway. So there's 4. Okay, let's go on and do our 4th point. It's Satiated Steel. This is a absolutely comfy, amazing pick for the Cord Claw. What it does is replenishes 25% capacitance, but as I said earlier, because our capacitance cap is now 88 and not 100, this isn't 25% of the whole, this is 28.4%. So we're getting an almost 30% refund on our claw if you can just get a single kill with it. So just doing this, look at our regen. Look at our regen on this ability. We are getting back down to having sub 10 seconds left before we get another charge back. And what this does is not only are we going to be staying higher on charges overall in the course of the game, meaning we're going to be getting more residual current buffer, more auto repair doctrines, and more value of advanced power management, but we're also getting better uptime on sequence charge here because we're speeding towards our regain of charges by just instantly blitzing about 30% of our charge back. And this means we're going to have the better uptime on sequence charge, which is a strong buff, 12.5% strength to all sources of damage, right? That's really, really good. So this one is definitely good, and we will not miss this damage to Slice and Dice, I promise you that. Okay, we have 3 nodes left, and they are going up here. As you might imagine, we are taking Resurgence. Resurgence is a very, very comfy aura, and that is why we have this toughness regeneration speed in our Curios. This multiplies this regeneration by 90%. Meaning that we can get so much more back. And if you're playing non-Havoc, this is a ton. Even if you're playing Havoc, it's still a ton percentage-wise because your overall toughness values are nerfed in Havoc, but it adds a ton of comfort level to this build because if you don't take damage for 0.9 seconds, it's shortened because of these Curios. They lower the window for regen. So after 0.9 seconds, you'll start to regen even in melee combat, and this is added on top of a bunch of other passive regens. And because a lot of classes out there don't really care about cleave, 15% cleave is almost nothing to them, but a lot of classes don't even know it, but they do care about coherency regeneration. Regeneration going on all the time when you're in melee, that's going to prevent you from taking damage. Cleave isn't really going to add anything. So this is a ton of value for not only you, but the whole team, and even more passive toughness regeneration that we don't have to think about at all. It just happens. And a great reason to stay near your team too, because they're obviously, it's good to play with your team. So we'll take System Shock to get to that, and let's talk about System Shock real quick. So electrocuting enemy applies 4 stacks of 2.5% brittleness to them. And since this is a build to improve on Reginald's build and he loves numbers, let's talk some numbers here. We of course are using Electrostrike Conduit. We have between a 50 and 60% critical chance with their Transonic blades. On the first target hit, that's a pretty high chance of getting that crit, right? However, you can also guarantee this with a Cord Claw Strike because this is a guaranteed crit on your first target hit. So we can guarantee brittleness stacks here. The overall numbers, the way this maths out is capacitor limit override, 15% rending here versus 1 stack of System Shock. System Shock at 1 stack at 10% brittleness brings you within 5% of the damage value. It's the difference between doing it 950 damage with a Cord Claw attack with a Transonic blade attack to 900 with 1 stack. However, this obviously can stack more than 1 time. It can stack up to 40%. So what you'll see here is that, if I go ahead and I attack this bad boy here, wait to do the red mode. So if I do one of these attacks on him, we're hitting for 772. But what if I hit him with one crit here first? We're hitting for, if I could actually hit a headshot, Oh my god, stop turning. That's so annoying. 1288. That's with 30% brittleness. Can I get a 40? 1252. Yeah, like I'm probably missing the heads here a little bit, but yeah. Oh, there we go. 1554. Like this is a massive damage increase, and this node here is not only our melee damage, like with our Transonic, which adds a lot of value because Transonics don't have this. The brittleness is just rending, but it's applied to the enemy instead of to you. So we are at 40% rending effectively, but for all types of damage going into this enemy. And one thing that's really valuable about brittleness is that it applies to everything that's hitting this enemy, including your teammates, including your melee weapon, including your range weapon, including your cord claw, and including your new spheric command. So look at the difference that we can get here. First of all, rending as a buff, if we had that 15% rending, that does not apply to your service call or your new spheric command. But look at the damage that this does. At a baseline, we're hitting for like 93 or so. Look at what happens as I stack this guy up with some critical hits. We're hitting for triple that damage, right? We are actually melting this guy with new spheric now, because that is one way you can massively augment the damage that they take. And just for some perspective, this is a Havoc 40 Psychanium. I'll just reload it to make the point. But yeah, this guy is getting absolutely melted out because that brittleness 40% is a fuck ton, against crushers, and it's a lot against pretty much everything else as well. So being able to apply brittleness at a baseline, this is not only super high damage for the class, but it's damage team-wide. And as the years go on and less Skitaris are in games, this is going to be a buff that people will want the Skitarii to bring, because he's like one of the only classes that can bring brittleness and have it in such an easily accessible and powerful way, right? He is bringing brittleness in all these types of builds, and it's super valuable for wiping out bosses and big targets. GG. So this is an absolutely valuable node, but maybe even better than that for our purposes is Retribution Conduit. And this is the last node we'll put in here. This node alone boosts our damage by 35% on all electrocuted targets. So if this target is electrocuted by being hit one time with a critical strike, their next follow-up hit is going to have 10% more brittleness and take 35% more. Let me show you the difference here, okay? This is kind of silly, the amount of damage this does, but let me do a crit with a red attack here. Let's do a crit and then an overhead. Crit. Give me a crit. Give me a crit. Well, I did it, and then of course I wasn't ready for it. And then an overhead. 888, right? Okay, now let's look at what happens if we do the same thing, but we have these two nodes allocated. Clear you out. Crit and then an overhead. Here we go. 1659. I mean, I crit there as a follow-up, but I mean, yeah, look at these numbers, right? Because this blade here is being multiplied not only by the brittleness that's being applied to these enemies every time we crit, but also they are now electrocuted, they're paralyzed, they can't do anything, and they take 35% additional damage from the follow-up attacks, which is all multiplied in. And this is damage, not melee damage, but damage. So what this means is our ranged weapons are doing this damage, and our cord claw is doing more damage. Remember how the rending node over here doesn't give any value to the cord claw because the cord claw already has a bunch of rending? Well, this is just 35% fucking damage to cord claw, right? So let's look at the difference here, and we'll show side by side. This is the last thing I keep you here for, but slice and dice, right? Remember slice and dice? So let's keep everything equal, and let's do slice and dice as a node for buffing our cord claw damage versus Retribution Conduit. We'll spawn in a boss here and we'll test them side by side. Here's our chaos spawn. Okay, so I'm gonna headshot him 2 times back to back with the base Reaper cord claw. 1, 2. There we go. So we ended up at 61.4. Okay, clear them out. Swap our nodes over. We're gonna remove slice and dice and go to satiated steel for the better capacitance regeneration. We'll go Retribution Conduit up here. Pop him in. And we'll go 1 and 2. 62.3. So we lost 1,000 damage, but we just did several, like, you know, how many was this guy spawned in with? We just did almost 18k. But this is like the low end, right? If you opened up with cord claw. What if I open up by just getting a crit? Like just getting any random crit with this, and then I do 2 cord claws back to back. There we go. 57. So now we are 4,000 damage past, and this is where the power is here, right? Is that if we can crit and we can apply that brittleness and we can apply the electrocution, our first Cord Claw hits for 35% extra damage, and this immediately means you are outscaling the damage potential that the 20% stacking Cord Claw could ever have. And then our ultimate like facet, like total like boss damage could be something like this, where we are going to use a new Spheric to put 15% extra damage taken here. We'll cap his damage out with our Faster Pistol, which applies another 15%. We'll then make certain we get 4 melee crits here, so put them 55, and then we'll do our Cord Claws back to back, and we'll deal, you know, 50,000 damage in the span of, what was that, 5 seconds or so. Like, that is the, that's the potential power that we could be having here with a build like this. And that is the build that is like this. There you go. So overall, I think this is just a hands down better build. Not only automatically do we have a better capacitance regeneration cycle, we have so much more capacitance on hand in general all the time now because our batteries are 12% leaner, but we are also going to be picking up a ton off of satiated steel. We're going to be hanging out at high charges, which is going to give us a ton of passive benefits, much more value out of advanced power management, much more value out of sequence charge, better regeneration, better toughness, damage protection. We'll get even more cleave out of our Cord Claw strikes because of adaptive combat calibration. We'll have more regeneration of our toughness passively through Resurgence, and we'll trim out some unneeded cleave that we swapped out here through this, and then we'll boost our team's damage and our damage with System Shock, getting a tremendous value out of this because of the frequency that we can crit. And then finally we'll top our damage to insane levels with Retribution Conduit and be able to amplify not only our melee but our range, but our Cord Claw as well, and really tear to bosses. So this is a mystery optimized Reginald build certified TM. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Reginald, balls back in your court. I'll see you soon, buddy. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.